In the late 1800s, women banded together in clubs and organizations like the YWCA to combat poverty and also to improve the lives of women. For example, the YWCA in Boston have been studied for the work that they did, providing housing for the poor and other support for poor young women. They built safe housing for working girls, and they also even provided the very first gymnasium activities that were offered to women. What historians have found is that they were also very careful about exactly which poor young women they were going to help. They made sure, for example, that YWCA clients were Protestant and not Catholic. Also that they were native born and not immigrants. And if they were poor, they still had to come with references that showed that they were from respectable families, not the very most impoverished in American society. The YWCA was careful to protect the sensibilities of the society ladies who were going to be doing the work. And also, you can see in the shape of the YWCA the emphasis on women as the keepers of culture and refinement. The home included rooms for the girls that could be used for self-advancement through book clubs, through jobs skills classes, and through religious speakers. Well, if we look at Fitchburg's history, there was a similar kind of an institution, which was called Hastings Hall. It was a similar kind of resource for working women who had come to Fitchburg. It was located at 135 Holt Street near Morin Square. It was built for working girls by the local philanthropist Lucy Fay Griffith and a group that she formed called the Helping Hand Association. When Hastings Hall opened in 1908, it was called a magnificent building. The entire community came out to tour the hall. It advertised that it offered security, serenity, and stability. And of course, it was close to Main Street, so they could offer access to intercity trolleys and also offer bus trips for the girls that lived there to go on. For $5 per week, the women living in Hastings Hall got quiet and restful surroundings with good airflow and high altitude. They got their laundry taken care of, a living room and sewing room, and later a tennis court. By 1960 to 63, it was $13 per week, but that was a room plus also the dining hall meals. You could sit on the back veranda enjoying afternoon tea and watching a game on the tennis court. One recent document said that it offered pizza, but when I double-checked, I saw that the records from 1908 mentioned a piazza, a good example, I think, of how mistakes creep into the historical record. Now, in the summer, Hastings Hall offered vacation room rentals, and some women ended up living there for their entire working lives. It closed in its original form in 1977. Ultimately, it was renovated and reopened in 1982 as a private rental for both men and women, and without any meals being served. I'm sorry to say that there are no first-hand reminiscences of living in Hastings Hall that are in our records. I hope that some will come our way before it is too late. One example of a historical woman that most of us didn't know about is Sophia Sawyer. If you're from Arkansas, however, it's much more likely that you'll know who she is. Now, Sophia Sawyer came from Fitchburg. She was born in Fitchburg in 1792. Her family was a poor farm-owning family. She became a teacher, and eventually she applied to become a missionary teacher with the Cherokee Indians in Tennessee and Georgia. She went out there and taught the Cherokee women, and eventually she moved further west and ended up establishing a seminary called the Fayetteville Female Seminary for the Cherokee. It's in Fayetteville, Arkansas. She established it way back in 1839. So now, Sophia Sawyer from Fitchburg is considered one of the founding mothers of the state of Arkansas. But she's also a typical New England woman, shaped by religion and by a belief in education.
1, 2, 3.
In 2012, Fitchburg's historic City Hall was listed as one of the most endangered historic properties in Massachusetts by Preservation Massachusetts. Frequently, a building does not come back from that designation, but this is the story of a historic building that was preserved and renovated and now is used by the public again. The story of Fitchburg's historic City Hall. The building had been closed a few years before because it was suffering from sick building syndrome. Some of the interior was no longer safe because of some of the materials and processes that had been used in the 1964 renovation and other renovations. The outer shell of the building, which dated all the way back to the 1850s, was still quite strong and very beautiful. The city decided that it needed to be preserved. More than 150 years before this, the town meeting of Fitchburg had met on January 5th of 1852, and they decided that they had needed a new townhouse at that time. So they appointed a committee to look into the matter. The city was newly prosperous as an industrial center based on the power of the Nashua River. The Sentinel wrote about their current townhouse in 1852, saying, "The dingy old townhouse with its grim black walls festooned with cobwebs, its nondescript floors inlaid with quids and tobacco juice, its uncomfortable benches upon which a man was rather caught than seated, this dingy old receptacle was well adapted to the hatching and brooding over of strife and dissensions." They decided that there was too much arguing at town meeting and perhaps a bigger, more commodious town hall would make the situation better. At this time in Fitchburg, there was a lot of dissension between the two parts of town, between the old city down by the railroad depot in what is now Lower Main Street and the upper town in the Upper Common. So they started fighting over where town hall would be placed. Well, Old City had just gotten the new railroad depot, and so they wanted to have the town hall too. Ultimately, it was decided that each part of town should have one of the big new buildings. So while the Old City at the lower part of Main Street had the railroad depot, it was decided that the town hall would stay up by the First Parish Church on the Upper Common. But now there was the question of expense. The committee decided that the new building would probably cost $14,000 and that the furnishings would be $2,000 and that they would need to pay $4,000 for the land. All told, that would be $20,000, and that was put at the disposal of the building committee. The instructions to the building committee were, don't spend $1 more, according to Doris Kirkpatrick's book, The City and the River. But when the bids came in, they were all for more than $14,000, and the committee was discussing whether or not they would have to settle for paying more. But one member of the committee was Ivers Phillips. He had just had to rebuild his factories after his cotton mill was destroyed by a giant flood in the Nashua River. And he felt that he knew how to get a building built cheaply and well, and that he could do the same thing for the new town hall. So Ivers Phillips said to the committee, I will resign my place on the committee, and I'll be the one who takes on the responsibility of building the new townhouse for $14,000 and not $1 more. The team that Ivers Phillips put together was made up of many Fitchburg people. There was Ward Farrar. He was a carpenter and contractor. There was Deacon S.A. Wheeler, who was a stonemason. William H. Goodwin was responsible for cutting the big timber for the trusses. And the bricks were made by Fitchburg brickmaker Alonzo P. Goodrich. Additional brick was also imported from New Hampshire. In fact, the first pressed bricks ever used in Fitchburg were put into the new townhouse, the building we know today as the City Hall. The building's progress moved right along. By September 1852, the building was not entirely finished, but it was finished enough that a Democratic state convention could be held in it. The Lowell Daily Advertiser spoke about the Fitchburg Town Hall, saying, "The new town hall, not entirely finished, is one of the largest and most elegant in its architectural arrangement in the state, and will be a lasting monument to the liberality of the place." There were speeches, there were original poems, songs by the Fitchburg Musical Association, and an overflowing crowd that was there to mark the achievement. According to the Fitchburg Sentinel, this is one of the finest halls in the Commonwealth.